Hello and welcome back to Daily Buying Tips. I'm Dean Berman from Berman Buys. Today we're going to talk about what to do when you buy your first home. You're no doubt a first home buyer and you want to get your first purchase right. However, it can be a bit confusing as to what the process actually looks like, which I'm going to outline very shortly. To start, you need to work out how much you can borrow. To do this, speak to a bank or your mortgage broker and they will collect a bunch of information about you, and from that they'll be able to ascertain how much you can actually afford to borrow. Once you understand how much you can borrow, it would probably be a wise move to also get that same mortgage broker or bank to get you a pre-approval. A pre-approval is basically the bank saying that you're good for how much they believe that you can borrow, and that pre-approval document generally lasts about 3 months. Now the fun stage begins, the research. Now you can start working out what areas are going to be right for you and your budget. Once you have those areas narrowed down, then you can actually start the search, where you start looking for properties that match your areas of choice and your budget. If you did your research correctly, you will start finding property options within a few weeks of starting the search. Once you have a property or properties that you like, I would highly recommend inspecting them to make sure you actually like what they look like in real life. If it was me personally, I would look out for structural issues, I would look out for pest and or water damage, and anything else that looks untoward that could potentially affect the long-term use of that property. If you're finding it totally impossible to find anything in your areas of choice, you may have to redo your research to make sure that the areas of choice actually meet your budget. Another really simple thing to do is to simply ask the agent, is there anything wrong with this property? Have there been any issues, any structural issues, or anything untoward that could potentially affect it and your decision in moving forward with the property or moving on to the next one? If you like this property and you want to move forward with the property itself, I would highly recommend requesting a contract get sent to your email, which you're able to forward to your conveyancer or solicitor. Now we get to another awesome part of the process, which is the negotiation. This is a time in the process where a lot of money can either be saved or spent very quickly. It's important at this time as well that you don't give away too much information. As the saying goes, keep your cards close to your chest. Initially, you want to set a maximum price you will go to as a starting point, and then you work backwards and come in with a price that you think is reasonable and fair, but also is in line with the current market conditions as a starting point. Terms will also affect the purchase of the property and how the sellers perceive you versus other offers they potentially may receive. Strong terms include cash offers, limited settlement periods, removing the cooling off period, which would make your offer a lot more enticing to sellers than potentially other competitors' offers. However, being a first home buyer, it would probably be unlikely that you would have a cash offer for your first property. The deposit amount is also another hot point in the negotiation, generally either 5 or 10%. Try go the lower the better. If the offer and terms are accepted, it would be wise as a next step to get what's called a pest and building inspection report and or strata report if it's a strata development, to give you further clarity and peace of mind knowing that there's no underlying issues with the property that you're looking to purchase. If all that comes back positive and you're ready to move forward with the property, now's the time for your conveyancer or solicitor to go through the contract and give you legal advice as to whether there's anything that's going to affect the purchase. You will most likely now pay a 0.25% deposit and sign the contract, after which you go into a 5-day cooling off period to further decide if there's anything that's going to affect the property and do any further checks that you may require to do. If any issues do pop up at this legal representation time frame, it would be wise to reassess what those points are and understand the costs potentially to rectify those issues, in which case you could potentially renegotiate the price and or negotiate some better terms with the sellers. After this 5-day cooling off period is up, that's when you'll pay the balance of the deposit, which was already agreed upon earlier in the negotiation, being either 5 or 10%. On some occasions, the seller don't want a cooling off period, in which case you would sign what's called a 66W, which basically waives the cooling off period and makes the property go unconditional straight away, in which case you wouldn't be paying a 0.25% deposit, you'll be paying the full deposit, either 5 or 10% straight away, and the property will go unconditional straight away. It's also important to keep your bank and or mortgage broker up to date during the whole process, so they're in a position to get your formal approval as soon as possible to ensure that you have finance when it comes to the settlement period, the end of the settlement period. Once either the 5-day cooling off period has lapsed and you have paid the balance of the deposit, or you went for the 66W option, potentially in a very competitive market, that's when the property has gone what we call unconditional. Now you will wait for the settlement period to occur, which is usually about 42 days. Once this has happened, your mortgage will formally come through and you will take formal ownership of the property at the end of the settlement period. Now you can say a massive congratulations because you've just bought your first property.